Hi, everybody. Welcome. It's Krish Kandai here. I am coming to you from Paddington Station. You might have heard there is a rail strike going on, and I've just been caught in the middle of it. I was on a train headed home on my way to kind of Reading area, and then the train got turned around and we're back again in Paddington. So I hope that isn't a parable for how you're feeling right now. You've been turned around, but we are going to have a fantastic seminar today. We've got some amazing speakers, and I'm going to try and find another way to get home in just a minute. We've been doing a series of seminars trying to help newly arrived people from Hong Kong find ways to connect their skills with the needs and opportunities there are in the UK for work. We've done some amazing seminars on writing a covering letter, interview skills, understanding different cultures. It's been really, really inspiring. And today we're going to think about starting your own business. Hong Kongers have a global reputation for entrepreneurship, and in many cases it's really justified. And I know lots of you have a vision to start a new business. We've been talking to many of our Hong Kong friends who've done just that. And so today we've got some expert advice helping us think through some of the challenges and opportunities and the differences of starting a business here in the UK. So I'm delighted to be able to hand over to Emily, who's going to lead us through the first of our sections in a minute. One thing that we say to you is that we really love questions. Just put a question into the question box and we'll do our best to answer them. Sometimes I'll even interrupt the speaker very graciously, hopefully, and just follow up some of the questions that you've got, because it's really important to us that we help you where you're at. And if you feel your question is too simple, it's probably the right question to ask. So feel free just to put anything you want in there and we'll do our best to try and answer them. We're good at general questions rather than trying to fix your specific issue. So try to think about issues that other people might have and how we can give you some wise advice that will help in a range of different circumstances. But Emily, over to you. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and letting our guests know who you are. We're so grateful for you giving us your time today. Thanks for being part of this seminar.
Well, that's a pleasure, Krish. Thank you very much. Sorry to hear about all the troubles you're having with the travelling. I hope you get home safely. So for guests this afternoon, good afternoon. I am Emily Coltman. I'm a qualified accountant and I work for a company called Free Agent. We make online accounting software for freelancers, contractors, small service-based businesses. We are British based, but we've got customers right across the globe, including Hong Kong. And we are very friendly and user friendly. That is what we kind of pride ourselves on, in making accounting as straightforward as we possibly can. I would endorse what Krish said about questions. One favourite saying of mine is there is no such thing as a silly question. If there's something you need to ask, please pop it in the Q&A box like Krish said. And Krish, if you need to interrupt to put a question to me, you go right ahead. Just shout out. Don't worry about putting your hand up, Krish. Just ask. Thank you for sharing the slides. Sam, if you could skip to the next one, please. Firstly, I would say welcome to this seminar and welcome to the UK. If you've not, it's great to have you here. Next slide, thanks. What I'm going to talk to you about today is what kind of business you might be setting up. And by what kind of business, I'm talking about legal structure. I'm going to kind of introduce you to the legal structures that businesses in the UK can have. I'll talk about whether you need a business bank account. I'll touch on what insurance you might need to trade here in the UK. Talk a bit about the health and safety laws that you might encounter in the UK. And then I'll move on to what you have to do to stay right with the government in terms of keeping your business books. So next slide, thanks, Sam. So the first legal type of business that you could set up within the UK is what's called a sole trader. And a sole trader means there's just one of you and there's no legal separation between you and your business. Legally, you and your business are one and the same. You can employ staff, but you alone would own and run the business. So the upside of being a sole trader is it's really simple. Because there's no legal separation between you and the business, you don't have to worry about whose money is whose. Everything the business earns legally is yours. You've got the fewest forms to fill in of any business type when you're a sole trader. Potentially, you might only have to do one form a year. If it's just you, you're not employing any staff, you might well only have to fill in just one form a year. That's going to change in a couple of years' time, though. Sole traders are going to have to start sending at least 4 or 5 reports in per year, but at the moment, just one. One thing you've got to be a little bit careful of when you're a sole trader is because there's no legal difference between you and the business. If the business gets sued, then potentially your own assets could be taken to pay the business's debts. So that's things like your home if you own it, your car if you own it. I have never known that happen to anybody I've worked with, but it's a possibility. So it's something that you do need to just be a little bit careful of. Next slide, thanks, Sam. The second type of business is what we call a partnership. A partnership is like a sole trade in that there's no legal difference between the owners and the business. But the difference with a partnership is there's more than one of you. So a partnership could be 2 people, it could be 5, it could be 50. There's no limit. You can set up a partnership with your spouse, with your romantic partner, with your brother, with your best mate, whoever it may be. But one thing I would urge you to do if you're setting up a partnership, even if it's with your nearest and dearest, is make a partnership agreement. Agree on, for example, how you're going to divide up the profit that your partnership makes between you. Is it going to be 50-50? Is it going to be 70-30? For example, how are you going to divide it? Also, you do need to draw up agreements for what might happen if, for example, one of you dies or one of you becomes seriously ill, or if you want to dissolve the partnership. That can happen. You know, none of us like to think it will happen, but I've known, for example, partnerships, business partnerships, come to a very sticky end because there was no partnership agreement in place and the people who owned them fell out. So make an agreement and do make it a legal agreement. Go to a solicitor and make sure you get a legal agreement. Next one, thanks. So the third type of business is what we call a limited company in the UK. And the key difference with a limited company is that it has a legal identity of its own. The company is a legal person in its own right, separate from the people who own it and the people who run it. So, for example, I used to have my own company before I went to free agent, and that company was a separate legal entity from me as a person. So the advantage of that is what we call limited liability. And what do we mean by that? We mean that if the business is sued, your own assets, your home, your car, and what have you, cannot be touched unless you've actually been guilty of wrongdoing. Your own assets are safe. They can't be touched. It's just the business's assets, the company's assets that would be taken. What you have to be a little bit careful of, though, because of course there's always going to be a downside, what you have to be careful of is that because the company is a separate legal entity from you, if you take money out of the company, you have to be aware that there could be tax to pay on that money. You can't just take money out of the business willy-nilly if you've got a limited company and not pay extra tax. You do have to check it. Also, it is a little bit more complicated. Limited companies and their directors already have to file at least 4 forms a year to the government, and that could only increase in the future. So you get limited liability. The company's assets are separate from yours. Your assets are safe if the company is sued, but there is a price to be paid for that in the shape of more forms to file. Next slide, thanks, Sam. The next question that arises is, do you have to have a business bank account? Legally, the answer is no, but I would very, very strongly urge anybody who's setting up their own business, no matter whether they're going to be a sole trader, going to be in partnership, or going to have a limited company, have a separate bank account for your business, because you do have to know what money you make, whether it belongs to you or whether it belongs to the business. For example, if the business has made some money, you maybe then inherit some money from perhaps a relative who's died. You need to know where all your money came from. Otherwise, the government, the tax man, can say, well, I don't believe that's money that you inherited. I think that's money your business made. Give me some more tax, please. If it's difficult to distinguish between your own money and the business's, your life could get a whole lot harder. The easiest way to keep them separate is to give them different bank accounts. If your business is a limited company, it's more important than ever you have a separate bank account for the company. In fact, many banks won't allow you to have a limited company that's operating through a personal bank account, a bank account that you own rather than the company owns. You really do need to make sure that you know what money belongs to the company and what money belongs to you. Next slide,
Emily,
thanks.
this is
Yes.
really, really helpful.
Good.
I wish someone had told me all this a long time ago when I set up as a sole trader. So thank you very much.
No problem. Am I running over time?
No, you're perfect. But just a question came up asking for clarity between, is there any difference between a sole trader and someone who's self-employed? Could you just help people understand that? I suppose it's a linguistic question.
Good question. And the answer is no, they're the same. You'd be self-employed if you're a sole trader. You would be self-employed if you were a partner in a partnership. If your business is a limited company, then you would not be self-employed. You are an officer, probably a director of the limited company. You are not self-employed. But if you are a sole trader or if you're a partner in a partnership, then yes, you would be self-employed. That is right. Thanks for that.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Not a problem. Not a problem. Thank you for that question. You do also need to think about what insurance cover you might need to run your business. For example, if you're employing staff in your business, and if you've got a limited company, that also includes you. If you're employing staff, then you're going to need to have what's called employer's liability insurance. So that would be, for example, if one of your staff sustained an injury while they're at work, they might possibly sue you and you might need to be covered by insurance. And it's a legal requirement to have that insurance if you employ staff. If you decide to set up a business that requires your customers to visit your premises, you are going to need public liability insurance. Public liability insurance would cover you if, for example, you were to set up, let's say, a hairdressing salon, and one of your customers slipped over on a wet floor in your salon and broke their leg. They might well sue you. You will need public liability insurance. What I would say is that if you're planning to start a business, ask advice from experts who are in that field or business experts as to what insurance you might need. I don't know if that's a service that UKHK provide. You could also seek guidance from local, what we call Business Gateway in Scotland, local business advisory services. But I would really strongly urge you to check to see what insurance you might need and make sure you've got it. Next one, thanks. Another example of an area that you really do need to make sure you ask a question about is health and safety. So, for example, if you've got dangerous chemicals in your premises, even if that is bleach for the loo, that's a dangerous chemical. What happens if someone drinks it? Make sure that you know the health and safety procedures that you need to follow. Make sure that you know how many first aiders you should have in your premises. Think as well about evacuating your premises if there's a fire. You need to make sure that everybody can get out safely. If you have employees with disabilities, make sure that they can evacuate safely. Again, ask the question of your local expert. Next slide, thanks. Now on to bookkeeping. So what you need to make sure you keep track of, you need to make sure that you keep track of your business's income. So what it's earning from its day-to-day activities. You need to make sure that you keep track of your business's day-to-day running costs. So what costs it's incurring to, so to speak, keep the lights on. So things like electricity, rent, mortgage, things like if you incur travel expenses, if you have some business cards printed, if you get a website set up, all of those will be day-to-day running costs. Make sure as well you know what cash is coming into your business and going out of your business. Cash is super, super important. You need to know what cash you've got on hand and what you're likely to have in the near future. When are your customers going to pay you? When have you got bills to pay? When have you got taxes to pay? Keep track as well of things like what equipment you buy for a business, whether that's a computer or a shop fit out or whatever it might be. keep track of whatever you're spending your money on. You need to know. And next one, thanks. How should you record it? Well, the rule at the moment is that if your business is registered for VAT, value added tax, I'm afraid I can't go into that today because that's a whole extra topic. If your business is registered for value added tax, which basically would kick in once your sales go over about £85,000 a year, then you must keep your records using a digital system. Obviously, I'd love it if that was free agent, but there's plenty of others out there. So you need to keep your books digitally rather than writing them out, for example, by hand in a cash book. And as I've touched on briefly, you will soon have to keep your records digitally for other taxes. So if you're a sole trader, that would be for what we call income tax. For a limited company, it would be for what we call corporation tax. So what I would suggest is that rather than having to move your business's books a couple of years down the line, find yourself a digital bookkeeping system that'll work well for your business and start using it as soon as you start your business. Because it's much easier to keep using a system you're familiar with than it is to go for 2 years with a handwritten cash book and then swap. Okay, I think it must be about time that I stop talking and hand over to David.
We have a few questions, Emily.
Of course we can have questions. Oh,
sorry to jump in there, David. Really, really helpful. There's a couple of questions to do with importing and exporting. What people ought to be considering if they're setting up a UK business but want to import something from the Far East. For example, he wants to import a noodle or toys, and the British pound it costs £1 and the shipping to the Britain is 0.2 pence. But what about the import tax? How can I know how much tax I need to pay to the UK government? Is there anywhere you'd advise that person to go to find out more information?
That is a very good question. I'll do a little bit of research while David is talking, if I may, and just see if there's anything I can find in terms of import tax. How it would normally work is or what my understanding is that you'd actually get a statement from the government that tells you how much you've got to pay. But it would I would think it would be about 20% of the sale price. But as I say, let me do a little bit of research into that while David's speaking, and I can get back to you.
That's really helpful. Weirdly, the other question is one I can answer. But someone was thinking about becoming a foster parent and wanted to know if they needed to set up a business in order to be a foster parent. The good news is no, you don't need to set up a business to be a foster parent. And actually, you don't normally get paid to be a foster parent. You're given an allowance, which is not taxable. There are two different ways you can foster children in the UK. One is through what's called an independent fostering association, and the other one is through your local authority. My personal experience as a foster parent is with the local authority. If you want a longer conversation about fostering, I would very happily speak to you. This is another part of my my life. So I'm very happy for someone to give you my email address, and we can have a longer conversation. But just in answer to your direct question, you don't have to set up a business or be self-employed to be a foster parent, because you're normally not paid. You're given an allowance, which is non-taxable. But Emily, thank you so much. That was really helpful. I'm doing a tour of UK train stations. I've been to Paddington. I've now bought a ticket on the last train out of London from Marylebone. This could be like a little adventure film during the seminar. Can Krish actually get home?
Where's Krish? So what are you going to do? Marylebone to High Wycombe and then get a taxi from there or something?
I have a fold-up bicycle, so I'm hoping I can use my fold-up bicycle to get from Wycombe to where I live. So that's the plan at the moment. We'll see. Mm-hmm. Anyway, David and I had a chat when I was actually in Scotland. Actually, the same weekend I met Emily. We were chatting while there was a tour going on of a Scottish whiskey distillery, and David and I had a really helpful chat. And I love what he does, and I think it's best if David explains it. But he has such a vision to help people get started in their businesses and to kind of enter the workplace, I thought he'd be a fantastic person for our seminar today. David, same deal. You carry on speaking. If we see questions, I will, as politely as I can, interrupt to help people just catch what you're saying. But really looking forward to hearing from you. So grateful to what Emily shared. It was just really, really so spot on and really helpful. So over to you, David.
Thank you, Chris, and very best wishes for the rest of your journey. And thank you, Emily, for handing over. I think reading through some of those questions, it raises the point that actually when you start in business in the UK, finding some support through an accountancy practice is absolutely critical to get right. Understanding your import duties, understanding your reporting requirements, all of these are answers that you can get from an accountancy partner. When I started Fluid IT 17 years ago, I absolutely picked the wrong accountancy partner, and it was a whole world of pain for 11 years before we finally got that right. So I think I would always look for recommendations, and Emily sounds like a very good place to start. And if you are looking to do some importing, ask the people that you are recommended to demonstrate that they know about it already. An accountancy partner is a key part of getting going in business in the UK. So I just thought I'd touch on a couple of points that Emily raised and give you a little bit of a flavour of my experience of having run a small business over the last 17 years. I started Fluid as a limited company, and I rather liked the domain, and I was pleased that I could register the company name. You can in the UK trade under a different name from the registered name of your company if you want to, but I was able to get a name that worked at Companies House, which is where the companies are registered, and as a .com domain name, which was a very nice start in the IT business. One of the things that Emily mentioned was get insurance cover. And one of the things that happened to me about 12 years into the business was I got a call from my insurer who said, would you like to renew your business insurance? And I was trying very hard to do a presentation for a client who was going to buy quite a substantial project from us. And I thought, in 11 years, I've never needed my insurance. I will deal with making money rather than spending it. So I said, I'd love to renew, but I haven't done your piece of paper yet. And I put him off into next week. And sadly for me, on Monday morning, one of my team called me up at 7:30 and said, I've just gone downstairs and stuck my leg in about 3 foot of water. And there had been a flood which wiped out our server room, which drowned after some very heavy rain. And it turns out that our insurer had renewed our policy, which was great. But because I didn't fill in his form, he had said that our business was much smaller than it actually was, which meant that when the insurance paid out, they paid out £20,000 to cover our losses instead of £80,000. And it has been a very valuable thing over the years to be the biggest idiot in the company. I'm pretty sure nobody else has made a mistake that has cost us £60,000. And it is a very useful point in humility when other people make mistakes. And you need to remember that actually, when you set up the business, a lot of the things that you choose to do with your time can have fairly material consequences. Tied to the name of the business comes setting up your domain, setting up your website, and dealing with your communications. And there are a couple of points to cover for you here. The UK is now governed by the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, that you may have heard about. And I can put a link in the chat with an organization called the Information Commissioner's Office that handles registering companies who deal with personal information. So if you have a computer system that tracks people's emails, telephone numbers, and all of this is quite common for customers, then you need to register your business with the ICO. Some businesses will not need to pay anything but you do still need to register, and I will put the link in the chat at the end. You do need to be careful about how you handle your communications and try not to over email people. Businesses are very sensitive to spam. But I think one of the things that we have found over the years is that people buy from people. And having undertaken something of a migratory journey myself, it sounds like Emily migrated to Scotland. I came from Switzerland and landed in England. The biggest thing that has helped my business succeed over the years is that very much of business is relational. People buy from people. They certainly buy from websites, but in order to build some relational capital and some relational momentum online, you need to know people who want to engage with you and engage with your business. So one of the favorite places to look for me is in your business story. Why are you starting your business? And quite often in a migratory journey, people like a link to an authentic product from a home country. There is a chap called Simon Sinek who gave a TED talk, which he called the Golden Circle. And he said that every company knows what they sell. Some people know how they go about selling what they sell. And those are slightly more interesting if the how is a bit better. But the companies that really make a success of it are the ones that have a really clear why. Why are you doing this? What is the purpose that drives your organization? Because where your values align with your buyers, they will be much, much quicker to buy from you, and you will unlock more growth for your organization. So the more you can dig into why you want to offer the service that you want to offer, the easier it will be for you to relate to the people who might want to buy for you. And that applies in person as it does on a website. One of the things that made a very big difference for me when I joined when I moved to the UK was that I actually joined a church in central London. I don't know where you all stand on faith. For me, I joined the church because of a girlfriend, actually, not because I particularly wanted to go. But what I found in the church was an amazing community. And through the church, they even offered me free office space. I found some charities that needed IT support through the church. And right from the beginning, began a process of building a network of people who had needs that I could meet. And people talk to people and they recommend you in. Word of mouth is quite common. And it's I would encourage you to do whatever you can to find a local community. It is a very powerful way to build momentum in what you do. And on the topic of building relationships, it's worth knowing that there is a distinction between what some people call a networker. And a networker is someone who looks in a room and thinks, who can I do business with in here? And a connector is somebody who walks into a room and as they listen to what people say, they think, actually, you need to talk to my friend who could really help you with what's going on. The more connectors you know, the more often you will find yourself with opportunity presented to you. I would strongly encourage you to be connectors, listen to the people around you, understand what they have to offer, and do what you can to build their networks for them, because they will reciprocate. So building relationships is a really powerful way to build your organization.
David, quick question.
Go for it.
Update, I am now on a train that seems to be going somewhere. Hasn't left the station yet, but it's on its way. This is the mini drama we're having in the middle of our webinar. Really love your differentiator between a networker who does seem to be about themselves and having a quite transactional approach to relationships, rather than a connector who's helping other people. That's so good. I've written that one down. Someone was asking, when it comes to digital communication, for wisdom about GDPR. That's something that we've got here in England and Europe that might not be in the same way in Hong Kong. And they asked specifically about insurance against getting it wrong, after learning from your very humble lesson about having the right insurance in place. Is that something you can give anyone any advice on?
Yes. So first of all, unless you are a massive corporation, you are highly unlikely to actually be punished under communication misbehaviors under GDPR. So the key thing about sending a marketing email is that people should be able to opt out. And in order to have received your email, they must have asked for it first. So that is an opt-in. So you're never allowed to just send someone emails. They have to ask for them, which is why a lot of websites say you will get 10% off your next order if you sign up for our newsletter. And they go, yes, you can sign me up. And then most people forget to unsubscribe from the messages. But there is a type of insurance, which is called a cyber insurance policy, that will cover you if, for instance, you are hacked and something goes wrong through your business communications and you start sending out viruses by email. It wasn't your intention, but a cyber insurance policy will cover you for that. The intention with GDPR is to stop very big insurance companies keeping the personal details on file for people who requested insurance 20 years ago and continuing to sell that to other companies in order for them to market to those individuals. They will be financially punished. At a micro business and small business scale, it's very rare that that kind of thing happens. I hope that covers that one for you.
That's so helpful and so clear. Thank you, Simon. GDPR, I have nightmares about it. So you've done it in a very calm and helpful way. Thank you. Someone else had a question about the digital side of things. They asked if they are only using a digital platform, let's say like Etsy, to sell their material, do they still need to submit a tax claim and all the bookkeeping that we heard about earlier?
I've answered that one for them, Krish. I put an answer in the Q&A.
Oh, you're quick, Emily. I'm impressed.
The answer would depend on whether you're viewed as trading. So I've shared with Polly, who asked the question, information about what counts as trade and what doesn't. There's basically 9 different what HMRC call badges of trade that they'll look at, and those are things like how often are you making sales, where did you get what you're selling. So for example, if you're selling off your granddad's record collection that you inherited, that is much less likely to be a trade than if you bought things in specifically to sell them. Things like, are you selling them in places where a business owner would usually sell goods? Are you aiming to make a profit? As I say, there's all kinds of different factors that they look at. So it's not a simple answer, I'm afraid. I could share that more widely if you like.
That's really helpful. And again, thank you both for bringing a humane face to some really difficult legislation and systems. So it's really, really kind. You're the smiliest people giving advice on tax and GDPR I've ever met. That's lovely. Quick question for David. After telling us that you had a difficult relationship with your accountant, could you give some guidance about what we should be looking for in an accountant?
If possible, find an accountant who can help you find an accountant. So if you know an accountant that you cannot buy accountancy from, they might work in a bank. If you can engage them in helping you find someone who provides services to a small business, you'll have a much higher chance of success of finding someone that can meet your needs. I think for me, it's very difficult to understand from an interview if someone is any good with a spreadsheet and understanding what the legal compliance duties are. And it's very difficult from that interview to understand if that person is going to be in touch at the right time and help you deal with the reporting requirements in a timely manner. I think I would look for an organization that was not brand new. I think a brand new organization might be a little bit risky. And I would certainly be looking for recommendations from people that I knew, and particularly recommendations from accountants. So I would definitely start by asking Emily. I think an accountancy practice that understood the business model that you were going for, whether it was import and export, whether it was professional services, or whatever it might be, would also be a good factor to think about as you approach that decision.
Fabulous. Thank you, David. And don't let me interrupt you anymore. If there's anything you else want to say,
okay,
carry on. And thank you for taking that interruption.
Could I possibly add a few words to what David said? Would that be all right?
Go for it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In terms of how to choose a good accountant, one thing I would say is make sure that you find an accountant who you can actually understand, because some accountants I've known love to make things complicated. And as you've heard, the whole sort of tax, bookkeeping, accounting, legal aspect is complicated enough as it is. If you can find somebody who explains things nice and clearly so that you can understand them, then I would say they are a good accountant for you to have. If you find somebody who talks a whole lot of what I call accountantese, starts using jargon and terminology that you can't understand, that to me is when you should say no, thank you. But David, would you agree?
Yes, I certainly would. You definitely don't need jargon in your life. And I think any service provider that you choose needs to empower you to make the relevant decisions.
Correct.
Whether that's in IT or accountancy or insurance. If they can't help you understand it, definitely don't buy from them.
Yeah, I agree with you, David. Thanks very much for letting me interject there.
No worries.
Fantastic.
I will just finish off with a couple of points on how to keep this going, because ultimately an awful lot of businesses in the UK fail in the first year, and the survival rate past 3 years is very, very low. And I think there are some very common business mistakes. In a network of value-aligned businesses, I've come across a pair of people who train business leaders in how to do, it's called sales training, but it actually covers quite a wide spectrum of decisions that business leaders need to tackle. When you do a price change, how you renew your contracts, can you educate your buyer before they've bought from you? And they've written a very simple, accessible book called Untangle Your Sales. And I really recommend it. And I'll pop a link in the chat as well. I'm afraid the introduction is absolutely awful. So just skip the introduction and go straight to chapter 1. But it is full of all of the classic pitfalls that people make when running a business over time that means that actually it won't go the distance. I think in order to help a business go the distance, the last thing I want to say to you is to encourage you to think about your support structures. Running a business can be very, very demanding. You can have customer complaints at all times of day and night. You can find yourself worrying about how much cash you don't have when you need it. You can find it quite scary when you are dealing with tax returns and you might not have enough cash to pay that at the moment, even though the business is healthy. And in order to survive all of those pressures, it really is worth thinking through what you're going to need to keep going. The first thing that I would say to you is you're definitely going to need rest. So when you start, don't start with a habit of working late. Be really disciplined from the outset about the amount of time you're going to spend working on it, because that discipline is not easy to implement later. So if you think it's hard to protect at the beginning, it only gets worse. The next thing I'd say to you is that if you can find a peer group, you will find enormous value from that. So if you are aware of other people, they might even be on this call today, who are starting businesses, keep in touch with them, walk that journey with them, look out for networks of small businesses. One of the most fruitful places to find networks is on LinkedIn. Sadly, there's more and more kind of noise that is not particularly business relevant, but it is a very easy place to access decision makers online, but also to discover communities of businesses who are helping each other deal with all of the effort of running a business. And it is quite a lot of work. I would also say there is a growing network of business coaches available. Some of them are quite expensive, but I spent 7 years working with someone who describes himself as a CEO coach, and it absolutely changed my life. And at a time when my company was making sales of 300,000, he was charging me £250 an hour. So I spent £6,000 with him that 1 year. And it was absolutely the best £6,000 I spent. I remember one particular discussion with him unlocked a new business opportunity that for us was worth £50,000 that year. See if you can find a coach that knows your business sector and can help you grow you and your business as you go on this road. And one of the final things that I'll say that we have as a support structure is we have an advisory board. So I have a board of 4 people who have experience that are relevant to my company. One of them has launched technical companies and run his own. One of them is a cybersecurity expert. One of them is a sales expert. And one of them is a communications expert. And I need their advice. And it is a fantastic discipline to write the reports that they need to see, and we do it on a quarterly basis, so I can ask them questions. And then for me, an advisory board should always be forwards looking. Where do we go? How do we make this decision? But there must also be a little window for them to say, actually, you really need to stop doing that. That's terrible. And there should be enough openness there. The last thing I will say to you, and this is the last support structure, and for me, it's the most important thing here, is find a healthy way to undertake this work with your partner, with your husband or wife or significant other. My father was a workaholic, and his drive to work cost him his marriage. And I have seen entrepreneur after entrepreneur fail in their marriages because their number one priority was always their business. When I started Fluid IT in my first year, the sales were a massive £14,000. And after costs, I had £4,000 left to try and eat and pay all my business expenses in London. I was very, very, very hungry. And luckily for me, at the church that I had joined, I met a young lady who was working as a lawyer, and after working a 16-hour day, looked at me and said, "Do I need to cook you dinner?" And mercifully, she fed me. And that got me through the first year. And there was simply no way that I was going to let this business overrule our relationship. And I cannot recommend that enough to you. Think about how to turn your relationship with your significant other into something that is a support structure and is not something that is going to adversely affect your home life. That's it from me.
Okay, well, I do just wonder if Krish might have lost his connection, if he's gone through a tunnel or something like that.
I think he might have.
Yes. I think he might have as well.
Do we have any unanswered questions?
I've been scooping them up as we've gone along.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think we've got any at the moment. Chris has marked a couple that he said he'd answer live. I think the claim for breach of GDPR, you've answered that, haven't you, David? And yes, I think you've covered that question that we've had in
cyber insurance
live.
one. Yeah.
Yes,
okay.
Indeed. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. It's interesting the point you made about business networking groups, because as you rightly say, David, they can take all forms. They can be online or they can be offline. I remember one networking group I used to be involved with was a group that related to all things wedding. So basically, if your business was in the wedding industry, you could be in that group. So for example, we had chauffeurs, we had florists, we had dressmakers, we had hat makers, all sorts. So and that kind of a networking group, I think, is really valuable because you can make referrals to each other. You can say, for example, okay, the florist might say, okay, I've got a wedding party that are buying flowers from me. If I send them to my fellow member of this networking group to get their dress made, then they'll get a discount on the whole package, and you can all work together and arrange things like that. So I totally agree with you, David, about networking groups. Hello, there's another question come in. I will go on mute and answer that. Give me a minute.
Just looking at the new question coming through. Wilman, looking at your question, what sort of ideas do you need to find? Is this advice for ideas for finding customers for your financial advice practice, or is it something else?
I read it as advice on what business to actually start. What I might say there, and I don't know if you'd agree with me, David, is where's your passion? Because as David says, when you're running your own business, it really does have a tendency to take over your life. You do need to set very clear boundaries. I completely endorse everything David said there. Because you're going to be spending so much time and energy into your business, do not, whatever you do, start something that you're not passionate about. I mean, for example, if I was going to start my own business, then the last thing I would want to do would be to set up a business about something that I'm really, really not that keen on, because it would seem like purgatory after just a few days. So follow your passion would be what I would say. Think as well about sort of, is there a gap that you've spotted in the market? Have you thought, oh, crumbs, I wish I could get somebody to do this or this or this for me. Well, why don't I do that for other people? Yeah.
I suspect, Emily, we've got another one here from you about the varying different amounts that accountants can charge. There's nothing like a bit of market research and looking for 10 numbers to call on Google and calling them. And the more you call, the more you will find out what is typical to be charged.
Yes.
It's worth knowing that the geographies in England will significantly impact the price.
Correct.
So if your accountant is in central London, expect it to cost an eye-watering amount because the rent will be enormous for their building, and so will the salaries. It is happily a relationship that can be had geographically almost anywhere. And as Emily said, she supports people all over the globe. You don't need to be right next door to your accountant. It is very nice to meet them face to face, but you don't need to feel tied to getting a London accountant if you are based in London. And you can definitely exploit that geography to your advantage.
Yes, indeed. Yes.
Quick question for me. When I was looking at setting up a business, you're often cross-sold a kind of business setup package, someone that will register your business with Companies House, register your domain name, set up your website. Do you have any advice on those packages? Are they worth the money, or do you think they're unnecessary?
I think that's mostly for Emily. The one thing that I would say is if you are going domain shopping, the one place to really avoid is GoDaddy. they will set you up on a version of Microsoft 365 that is an absolute disaster to work with. And every year we migrate several organizations off GoDaddy because they are in a world of pain. So simply from a domain shopping point of view, if you see GoDaddy, that's a bit of a red flag. Just look for almost anything else. In terms of the accountancy setup, I'll leave that one to Emily.
Thanks, David. So in terms of those bundled packages, I have to say that's not something I've ever encountered, because being an accountant, I've always had the wherewithal to do it myself. So that's not a business, a service I've ever used. So unlike David, I'm afraid I don't have a personal recommendation to share. What I would say, though, is to endorse something that David said a few minutes ago, is that Google is very much your friend, but this time you're looking for reviews. Look and see what other people have said about particular companies. If you get lots and lots of people saying, oh no, their service was really appalling, don't go there. You're always going to get the odd one or two people who don't like the service that they've been provided with. But do remember that might be down to the customer as opposed to the supplier, if there's only a small number of negative reviews. If, though, most of the reviews are negative, steer clear. Would you agree with me, David?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
The online review world is a little bit murky, and there
Correct.
are some people who will pay for lots and lots of positive reviews. So it's tricky, but yeah, worth exploring.
And like David said about getting recommendations for accountants, use your network, get recommendations from other people in your business network, see if they've used a particular company to set up their company, set up their website and do everything for them, and see what they think. What I would say, though, is that there are plenty of very good businesses that will do sort of the component parts. Certainly in terms of setting up a website, I've always used web designers that are web designers and nothing else, because it's quite a skill to have, and it's something that something where I've always preferred to go for somebody who is good at that. So it's very much a question of what's your individual preference.
Yeah. I think on that front of how you present yourself, one of the temptations when starting in business is to spend an awful lot of money on brand. And I think it's worth knowing that you can actually start with almost nothing. If you have a really solid LinkedIn profile where you can make quite a lot of noise talking about what you're doing, you don't actually even need a website. You certainly don't need business cards in this day and age. At the point where you have a mobile phone number or a phone number and you have an email address, actually you can get doing business. And rather than spend an absolute fortune on getting a logo design and a website done, my inclination, particularly from a bootstrapped company point of view, and I'm afraid that's my perspective, if you're looking to build something bigger and quicker, you might need to think more intentionally about brand. But you can actually start with a very thin edge without needing to spend a vast sum of money on getting all of that stuff perfect to begin with.
That's really helpful advice, David. And Emily, thank you so much for your wisdom, your insight. But thank you for helping us think about this holistically as well, that it's not just about the money and the taxes and the profile, it's about the people at the heart of this. And that's so useful. So thank you very much. Today's seminar has been part of an ongoing series to try and help people from Hong Kong feel welcome here in the UK. We've been running welcome festivals, we've been running educational events, and obviously these skills to business events too. We have one last event in this series coming up, and we're going to be talking to someone who works at LinkedIn. You were hearing from David just the importance of LinkedIn in terms of building the network and finding clients. And so it's great. We're going to have someone specifically from LinkedIn kind of helping us into that world. So can I just say thank you very much to Emily for joining us, and David on a warm day in the middle of a train strike. I am closer to home than I was. So things are going well. I'm assuming I'm going to go home, but if I don't, I'll keep you all informed on the drama. But thank you so much, friends, for joining us today. It's been an absolute delight getting to know many of the newly arrived Hong Kongers to the UK. We know that you're going to make a terrific contribution to our nation, and we're grateful to have you here as our friends and our neighbours, and we look forward to you being our colleagues as well. So thanks everyone, and have a fantastic rest of your day. See you at the next seminar.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chris. Sorry, I was typing an answer.